Ask the Podcast Coach for April 19th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from theschoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy Easter weekend. I hope everybody's having a great Easter weekend, and we're all here ready to go on Ask the Podcast Coach.
Except me. We were talking. Oh, I'm going to break my own rule. You ready?
Yeah.
We were talking before we hit record. That is a horrible thing to say.
I know.
That the pollen is starting to kick in here, and then everybody and their brother, except me, mowed their lawn, and so the pollen is kicking in. And I noticed this morning my throat's a little verklempt. If we go back to the days of Mike Myers, little like going on. So that's always fun. But you know what helps clear out your voice? Yeah, there you go. And yes, I'm sitting here going, wait, because I haven't turned that off yet. There we go.
Dribbling.
It's dribbling. There we go. And that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co, because he's amazing. There he is. And he's done a lot of artwork for me. Everything from Ask the Podcast Coach, School of Podcasting, Podcast Rodeo Show, Podcast Hot Seat, your podcast website. All of them are amazing. And he did exactly what I said he did, right? He sits down with you one-on-one and figures out what your show's about, what kind of vibe you want to do. And you're just not going to get that from some person on Fiverr. He's been doing this for over 30 years. He's an award-winning graphic artist, and he's a podcaster. And it's not just artwork. Look, do you need a whole website? Well, then, again, podcastbranding.co. Need a PDF for a lead magnet? Podcastbranding.co. Need artwork? Need anything that is going to be facing your audience? Podcastbranding.co, because they're going to see you before they hear you. And if your artwork looks like it was done by a third grader, well, then people might think that the whole thing's done by a third grader. And go see Mark. Tell him Dave and Jim sent you.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week, Troy. The Brad Pitt Troy version of Troy. I think he's Achilles in that one, and you can check it out today. How much? That's always interesting. How much of that story not only is true, but it's based on a true story. So you can check it out. I think they took a lot of liberty with the story on that in that movie, just to be honest. Check it out today, based on a true story podcast.com. And Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
Yeah, Dan says, happy Saturday morning. Dan, you'll be glad to know your brand has now gone through. I've been going to the movies. I don't know why. Here's the fun thing.
You bought a movie pass.
Yeah, I bought a movie pass, and it turns out you can't turn it off. Like, they're just going to take $20 from me forever. But I went and saw a movie. It's not worth, well, I wouldn't say it's not worth seeing. It's not worth going to the movies for, called Warfare. But it's, at the beginning, they didn't say based on a true story. They were like, something about this is following such and such platoon in Iraq on blah, blah, blah. But it was just black text, or black background and a white text. And as soon as that came up, I was like, oh, based on a true story podcast.com. So you've now migrated your brand into that. Hey, let's start off with a health tip, because why not start off with a tangent? Chris Stone says, hey, it's time to check. Warm Pop-Tarts, hot coffee, check. Free podcast consulting, check. There's a great app that Uncle Marv told me about called Yuka, Y-U-K-A, and it gives you a score from 0 to 100, and I pointed it at a box of Pop-Tarts. Want to guess what the score was?
Negative 17.
Almost 2. It scored a 2 out of 100. Yeah, I was
Is
like,
it the real fruit? That's probably the only.
That was brown sugar cinnamon. So I don't know what the deal was.
No fruit in that one. I bet the fruit ones get a little bit higher of a score than a 2. What's the level? What's the 0 to what?
0 to 100. Yeah.
0 to 100. I got a 2. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe the fruit ones would get like a 3 or 4. They're delicious. for a while, I was eating Pop-Tarts every day at work. We had them in the machine. The brown sugar ones that you're talking about are my fave
Oh
for
yeah.
sure. And I was just popping those things. I was clearing the vending machine out. Then they put the fruit ones in. I haven't had a Pop-Tart since.
That's it.
I'm not a fruit
There's
guy. No,
only
I
one
like
flavor
the
in my book: brown sugar,
I
cinnamon,
know.
or
Yeah.
chocolate.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
chocolate.
it.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have brown sugar, cinnamon, there we go. This show was brought to you by our good friends at
We-
Kellogg's.
We're in complete alignment on that.
That's it. That's the only two
Send your
flavors.
check to Dave Jackson, P.O. Box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's a fun question. And this is one of those. I was like, I'm gonna have to use this someday to start off the show. We do have to think, which is scary, a little bit, and it must be somebody from down under because it starts off with "G'day." I'm about to begin my podcast journey. I would appreciate if you could share your 3 biggest takeaways, advice learned on your journey for a newbie podcaster in order of priority. I'm a businessman and my specialist skill / knowledge is an expert in the new home construction space, building luxury homes. I would like to begin building a personal brand, add value to my community, which is other builders. So he's trying to add value to other builders. But 3 biggest takeaways from podcasting, or what would you tell a newbie? So do we want to go, I'll do 3, then you do 3, or I do 1, you do 1?
Let's just do that. Let's do it that way. 1 and 1. How about you
All
start?
right. So I think my first one would be, you have to answer the question, why are you doing this? Like, what's the goal kind of thing? And the reason for that, if you don't get that, you burn out. You just crash and burn. So that would be my first one.
Is that in order? So are you going most priority?
Yeah, I think that would be number one. Because I was gonna. Well, you'll hear what my next answer is, but
Okay.
I think that's the first one because, boy, it's hard when you have to go in order. Because now I'm kind of going like, well, actually, we should be doing this one, but I'm like, nah, I'll stick with my original answer. We'll go Jeopardy. No, we have to accept your first one.
All right, I'll do that order as well. And then if you're in chat or you're watching on YouTube, put your number 1 down in the comments. We'd like to see those as well. I think number 1 for me is be helpful. Like actually be helpful to people. I think, and you're kind of like, duh. I mean, that's kind of a duh answer. Of course I'm helpful. Okay, maybe this is only me, but there are moments when I get questions or when I get questions from my listeners, and I get the question, I read the email at the wrong time of day. I'm already in a busy mode, and it frustrates me. Like, oh, another question to answer, and I'll be short with it, or I won't, short hop it, so to speak, as we use in baseball terms. Just won't do the quality job that I should be doing. They're just looking for helpful advice. I kind of do this sometimes at work too. I need to stop doing it. So it is one of those things I just have to keep reminding myself. I podcast to be helpful. And so that's my number 1.
I'm listening to the book right now on Spotify called Predictable Profits, Transform Your Business. Oh, now I got to click on it to read the rest of it. Let's see. Predictable Profits, Transform Your Business from One-Off Sales to Recurring Revenue with Memberships and Subscriptions by Stu McLaren. And Stu McLaren used to own Wishlist Member. And if you go back in the day, there was, Wishlist Member was like the thing to do memberships on. And then he sold his shares. He talks about that, how he just woke up and was like, I want to do something else. So that'd be then my second one is, who is it for specifically? And so, because you can't say, like, I always love when people go, men 25 to 50. And I go, look, as a guy that's now 60, there's a big difference between a guy at 25 and a guy at 50. Like, and there are times, here's a weird thing that you don't hear me say a lot. There are times when maybe the niche isn't based on demographics. It's based on psychographics. So it's more about dealing with loneliness. Well, there are people that are, lonely at 25 and 55 that, but I think you have to know who it is, because I just go back to the days of when I was playing bars, and I always hated to see a bar that was always a block. Like for us, it would have been a rock bar, and then they went to, hey, Monday is country, Tuesday is comedy night, Wednesday is mud wrestling, and you're like, oh, come on, because they just drove everybody out of the bar. And so when you try to be everything to everyone, it doesn't work. So that would be my number two. So number one, why are you doing this? Number two, who's it for? Jim, you're number two?
Yeah, number 2 is be ready for the hard work. I mean, it's easy when you get started, right? It's super fun. It's like a rush. It's like an adrenaline rush. And you're like, well, it's not like it. It is. It's an
Yeah.
adrenaline rush, right? So you have dopamine and adrenaline and you're all addicted to it. And this is why people quit at 7, because the adrenaline stops.
Yeah.
And it's just hard work. You gotta kind of know, back to your number 1. You got to kind of know your why. That's the fuel that kind of keeps you going. But do not think those feelings, that rush continues forever. At some point you got to produce a podcast just on regular chemicals in your body, and you're like, oh, it's late, I don't feel like producing it, or I don't feel like putting it out, or I don't want to do the edits necessary, I just don't feel like it. Well, that's because you've been addicted to adrenaline for the first 7 episodes, right? And so just know that it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing. But just know eventually the adrenaline stops, and it's just hard work. And you got to find other benefits in it to make sure you're staying fueled.
Yeah, I always say it's a lot like a marriage. And what to me though, saying because people really focus on the launch. I want to have a big launch, like gigantic, like huge. It's a launch. It's the biggest launch ever.
Your launch was pathetic.
But I'm like, saying like your podcast will be successful because you had a big launch is like saying your marriage is going to be successful because you had a big wedding. And I'm like, in both cases, the work is really just beginning, and it's a lot of work in both cases. And then my new favorite question comes from Paul Culligan, and that is, what do you want the podcast to do? I used to say, how are you going to measure your success? But I this is a better way of saying it. What do you want it to do? Whether that's grow your network, bring you customers, position yourself as an expert, whatever it is, like, what do you want the podcast to do? Because that's what you're going to be looking at to figure out, should I keep doing this or not? Or I need to tweak it. If it's not doing it, doesn't mean podcasting doesn't work. It means your content's misaligned with your goal. And so that, again, kind of plays into keeping it. This is working in great because if it doesn't work, then you quit. And so how do you keep going? By going, well, am I getting what I wanted it for? Which kind of goes into, why are you doing it? But this to me, I think, is more specifically now, okay, I'm doing this because I want to do this and this and that. But now it's like, okay, great. But how are you going to measure that to make sure you're getting your why? So that would be mine.
Is that
your
3?
number? That's my third.
Number 3, right? Number 3 for me would be just always stay curious, and not just about your guest or your content, but the kind of the people around you, the processes that you're going through. This is one of the things that's been good for me about this show is, without it, I would not know 95% of what I know about podcasting, because we get questions around it. People bring stuff in. I just don't follow the craft of it. And I wouldn't follow the craft of it enough on my own. I wouldn't stay curious about podcasting if I wasn't doing this show. And so this provides a great way for me. People mention stuff in chat, or you mention something, I go look it up. I leave that tab up all week, by the way, so I could go back to it and review it and look at it. I think about all the great advice I've gotten, both from you and from folks in the chat room. They're having their own conversation about album art right now. That's the beauty of joining us live, by the way, is you're not going to get that in the recorded show, right? And so stay curious about the craft, and stay curious about your own learning, and you can always be learning more in this. And it doesn't require a lot. I think when we get first started, we get obsessed by it. We try to learn everything there is to know. Eventually that wears off too, but don't totally walk away from your podcast, the craft of podcast learning, and make sure you're staying up to date with what's going on in the industry and what people are thinking about things. Again, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to do it every way, but I think it's really important you stay up to date on your craft.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to Ralph's question, I'm gonna put Ralph's question on the screen. We're gonna talk about it, and then we're gonna pause it quickly because I have a question for you as a guy who works with coaches. And so Ralph says, "I asked this of others, but I would like to get everyone's opinion. Should I have custom artwork for each episode? I'm having a debate with my coach." So let's pause that because I want to talk about picking a coach
Mm.
because we talk about our why and how we're going to like ask your coach like, hey, what's the goal of this podcast? And if they're like, we're going to get you big and get you sponsors, and you go, well, that's funny because that's not why I'm doing it. Because every coach is different, and if you're not in alignment with what your coach, they're steering you in the wrong direction. So Jim, any insights on how do you pick a coach?
Well, I think you've got to do it just like you're hiring somebody to do some work on that. You have to ask some great questions. I think it's important to be aligned on some of the, you yourself need to come to this with some idea of where you want to go. When we think about the coaching contract in the context of what we do around coaching, we always talk about establishing a coaching contract, which is, hey, it's not rocket science. It's just, what are we trying to do here? And to make sure early in the conversations that you've got that outlined of like, this is what we're trying to achieve. And you can talk about duration and time and some of those other kinds of things, but I think it's also within a coaching relationship, it's also good for that coach to know some of your tendencies. We would say in my world, we would say know your strengths, right? Know what you're good at, know what you struggle with, not so good at. It's a dance. It really is to have a really good relationship and have a coach. I am it's funny. I work in this space. I don't tell any of my other podcast listeners that I'm saying this, okay? This is between us listening here.
Right.
I'm actually terrible at receiving that feedback sometimes or being coached. I coach coaches, but
Oh yeah.
I myself struggle when now there's a difference between responding to just sheer feedback or responding to criticism and then having a relationship with a coach. Okay. So there's a big difference in between those two. With a coach, you have a relationship, you've established it, it's something you're doing willingly. Just getting feedback. I mean, just someone giving you criticism is not coaching, friends. That's not a coach.
Right.
That's just that's just feedback. But even in a good coaching relationships, there are moments somebody's like, "Hey, have you thought, and it hits the it hits the nerve. You're like, "Don't talk to me that way," whatever. So I struggle. Everybody else probably has a great relationship with their coaches, but I sometimes struggle to take that kind of feedback.
Well, I have a student right now that I have multiple times said, "Hey, like you're getting ready to launch this thing, and you got the cart so far ahead of the." And he kind of came back and said, "I get that, I appreciate that feedback, uh, but I know what I'm doing." And I'm like, "Okay," because I'm just saying. And then I give him my reasons. If you do this, and if you do this, and if you do this, and if you do this, but you would never release episode one, all this work is for nothing. And he's like, "I get it. I appreciate it." I'm like, "Okay." So, and at that point, I leave it. I got to let the kid make it because he's making a mistake. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
that's. Ugh." But so Ralph, again, we're coming back to your question, but I saw this as well, and this guy said I analyzed 3,700 top podcasts, and here's what I found, and see if you find it useful. So most podcasts follow a weekly schedule, around 52%. Daily podcasts make up about 30%, while
That's
fortnight.
surprising.
Yeah,
That is
that
surprising to me.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not a fan of
Ugh.
daily stuff. I
Well,
that's way too
yeah.
big a fire hose for me. While the only one I listen to is James, and his is like 2 minutes. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then I listen to I take that back. There's the newsworthy. And although I'm starting to notice, see, I want my news without adjectives. When what I mean by that is when you talk about the president, I don't want to hear if you like him or dislike him. I
Yeah.
just want you to tell me what he did
What actually
without
happened.
adjectives. Just give me the facts. And I'm getting ready to lose that one because I'm noticing that they're getting a little adjective heavy on that.
Yeah.
But anyway, they go through this whole thing. True crime, weekly releases 72%, weekly consistent 70%, daily releases 17, and there's all this stuff. So I guess we'd be in education. So 52% are weekly, 70% are consistent, 28% are daily, and 64% are consistent. So you could go down here, and he's even got, the average duration is 49 minutes, and weekly podcasts tend to be slightly longer, which is around 52 minutes average, and blah, blah, blah. Here's what everybody else is doing, and that's why I don't like this chart. Like, you're like, oh, well, I guess I should do a 49-minute podcast because that's what everybody else is doing. No, that's where I'm like, sorry, because what works for other people, now we can go back to Ralph's question, if I can find out where I put it. The fact that somebody says you shouldn't do this, right? So if he goes back, should I use a daily or should I change my artwork per episode? And because somebody says I shouldn't, and I'm like, well, just because somebody says one thing, that person may not be your audience. You know what I mean? And so, I don't know. So, Jim, what do you think about it? Just to get back to the question, what's your opinion on artwork? To me, it takes literally 2 minutes to make artwork.
It's not a lot of time. Unless you're really bad at artwork, right? Then it can, if you've got a good source and you can do it, Dan, offered some good advice out there too. If it's something that can be done easily, and listen, if I don't know if it changes your numbers at all, like I don't think people are like, oh boy, the artwork's changing. This is the one I'm going to subscribe to. No, I think that's more a labor of love. I think it's more a craft thing. I think it's more of your art. Like when you look at, for me, when I look at a podcast feed and I look at the titles, and it's all the same, in most cases, most people just use the same album art going down, right? When you have a podcast feed that pulls in the album art from the episode and it shows it differently, if that list of album art going down isn't consistent or isn't the same style or doesn't make sense, it's jarring to me. This is me personally. Then it becomes jarring and you're kind of go, or it's bad. It's poorly done, right? Kind of thing. I think if you can make it look like art and in a way that looks, now art is in the eye of the beholder, right? So it just depends on who's looking at that thing. Because of that, I always say, if you like the look of it, do it. If you don't have the time or the talent, don't. I think that album art question comes down to that, to asking yourself that question. If I enjoy doing it, if I look at it and it feels good, we were doing some cleanup work on our podcast and we went through and tightened up some of the titles so that they were all the same width. So when you looked at them, it looked, nobody else is noticing this but me. But when I was looking at them, I was like, oh, that looks so good, right? I was proud of that. That was only for me, right? It was just for me. So Ralph, I don't think you're going to pick up a listener because the album artwork is different. Now, in some cases, if, maybe the YouTube effect would kick in, where if you did have the album art that was being shown on a device where it was bigger and, it had somebody, you got the typical YouTube face thing where they're going, on the thumbnail, maybe. But I don't think so. I think we've already spent more time talking about it than it'll ever be worth to somebody. But
well, I mean, here's the Akron podcast in Spotify. So I've got this consistent. In fact, in Canva, I've got it's just the words Akron at the top and podcast at the bottom. I throw something in the middle, and we're done. I mean, it takes me next to no time.
I don't look at that, Dave, and go, oh, I'm going to subscribe to that because it's different art.
Yeah. It's just if I go to future of podcasting where we don't do, which is, we're going to prove that you should never say, find me wherever you find your podcast. So I've just gone into Spotify. I've typed in future of podcasting. Let me click on podcast and shows. Yep, there it is, folks. This is why you never say, find me wherever you find your podcast. Because what do I have to do? Did I spell it wrong? Nope. No, that's shocking that there's not a typo. The future of podcasting. There it is. Ugh. Please quit saying find me where you find your podcast. I just proved it. And so here we've got the same artwork. Yeah, it's not really like, ugh, right? There's no, number one, because Daniel made some cool artwork. But where
I
that
don't think
doesn't,
anybody's looking at it, to be honest. But
I agree. But where it gets
yeah.
kind of old is on your website. Because in this case, at
True,
futurepodcasting.net,
true.
that's where it's like same.
Yeah.
And again, now are
Yeah.
people gonna like bail? Like, oh, I'm not listening to that show because they don't do individual artwork. But and that's the
In Dan Lefebvre's case, like Dan's covering movies, and now
yeah
can you make artwork inspired by the movie, and can you do it without getting in copyright trouble? Is that going to be? I don't, Dan. As I'm looking at it, you're like, I was like, oh, is that okay? Anyways, but there's, I mean, there's a visual representation
yeah
of and I don't know if this is necessarily his album art, but we're seeing from sight. But all of a sudden, when I see it, I go, oh yeah, that's that movie. I know that Black Hawk Down image, right? Because it's been in the media, it's been used before. So I don't know. It's a good question. It's a really good. I'd say if you have the time, do it.
yeah
If you don't, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
yeah. That's really it. But it's just one of those things where if you in Canva or whatever you're using. Oh, by the way, I typed in based on a true story and hit search. Let me go to podcasts. Podcasting. Okay, with Dan's it came up, but I had to click on So his artwork is here.
Yeah, inspired.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And you don't run into any trouble with that being too close to the original stuff, do you? Somebody saying, yeah, it's inspired by it, but it's pretty close in some cases.
Yeah, it could be. It could be kind of,
obviously he hasn't, because he's still doing it.
Yeah, and
obviously it's working.
Yeah, Daniel says Spotify search is worse than Apple. That is true. What was funny is we were asking people what were your top tips for new podcasters, and they were like strawberry Pop-Tarts.
That goes back to the early. That goes back to the early.
Yeah, because Mark said add value to the listener's day, which kind of goes back to what you were saying, which is yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things you can do it. Like Jim said, don't spend. That's the thing I have found. I'll go into Canva, and I'm like on minute 3 of picking artwork, and I'm like, yeah, hold on. Like, let's just. It doesn't have to be, should I do this one? This one has a bit of a purple hint to it. This other one's kind of just, like pick one. I don't think that that's one of those things that we can obsess over with if we're not really careful about it.
Well, I think it also probably depends on how your listeners are listening to your podcast. Like if you that album art would appear as you're listening to it, like on most podcast players. And if it was different per episode and your podcast player supported episode artwork instead of just the album artwork for the podcast, and the majority of your listeners are doing that, that might be a nice touch, right? It might be a nice touch to put that in there.
Todd the Gator says, hey, I've seen some album art where I can't determine what the dang podcast is, but just a topic title, like Jim stated. Yeah, anytime somebody says, which one of these artworks do I like? Which one do you like? I will almost 9 times out of 10 go where the one where the title is ginormous, because in the end that artwork's going to be really tiny, and it's like, or my favorite is now when they pick a font that's in cursive, because I think if you're under 20, you may not know what cursive writing is. It's some sort of like, what is this weird squiggly stuff that you're doing? I'm like, so since I do a video each day, should I be posting it to Spotify? Same answer. If you got the time and you want to do it, go right ahead. But the fun thing, my favorite app now, hands down, is Pocket Casts. For this very reason, I can't see it. I can't show you because it's on the other one. But I logged into Pocket Casts online, I go to Sounds Profitable, and I can see where I have 2 bookmarks in Sounds Profitable. What's cool is if you were to look at Sounds Profitable on Pocket Cast, you could see my bookmarks. That's kind of cool. But they did clarify. We were talking about this last week about Brian Barletta's comments, and so they have since come out and clarified this on the title was Economic Expectations and Automated Podcast Upfronts. But here's what they said.
Publishers. Since the original publication, further clarification has been added to the piece, specifically to the section discussing how.
Yes, Dave listens at 1.5. Let's speed that down a bit. There we go.
Adding a video podcast through Megaphone or Spotify for creators can cause an entire podcast to be cached inside Spotify. For clarification's sake, if a podcast is not hosted on Megaphone or Spotify for creators, manually logging into either platform and uploading a single episode does not trigger the entire podcast being cached, and it will continue to operate as normal.
So that, in other words, if you're not on Megaphone or Spotify, that whole, if you update one, it updates the whole thing. That's the stipulation. Because I was kind of like, wait a minute, that's brutal. That would be the case. The other thing I wanted to play is, to their credit, one, I forget her title, but I guess it's, that's Pod News Extra. But James Cridlin, number one, I'm a James Cridlin fan. And when I listened to this, he asked some pretty poignant questions. And the thing I thought was interesting is every time he asked a good question, and we were talking about this at the School of Podcasting, the Spotify representative would, you've ever seen, like, if I ask Jim, what's your favorite pizza? And Jim goes, before we talk about pizza, let's talk about Pop-Tarts, right? And they changed it. So she did this 3 times where it's like, well, let's step back, because James would ask a very specific question, and she'd go, well, let's step back a bit. In fact, here's one version of that.
Some stories about companies that have moved from audio to video, and they've made a bit of a thing that they weren't earning as much. How is it working in terms of the revenue that creators are getting?
Yeah, well, maybe, if it's okay with you, maybe we can step back first and just talk about like our video strategy, how SPP works, because I think there is.
So that was the first. Hey, let's step back and not exactly get into the specifics, and then later.
But I think, again, I would love to zoom out and go back to talk about total revenue, because this is the question we keep getting from people.
So that was number 2.
How much money will I make from
then number 3?
You get videos that are uninterrupted by ads. Why would advertisers only want to reach people who can't afford to pay for Spotify Premium?
Oh, I think that's a really interesting way to frame the question. So I think what advertisers care about at the end of the day is reaching as many audiences, as many people as possible. And maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of like step back and talk about the whole revenue picture here.
Yeah, let's go back and talk about the whole thing. Let's not talk about specifics about how. And then I love this one. Tell me if this confuses you, Jim. Listen to her answer.
Spotify Partner Program, does that do both video monetization and audio monetization?
Yeah. So basically, if you opt into Spotify Partner Program, you are able to monetize both your video and your audio content. We only pay out premium revenue for video content, though.
And
wait a minute. So yes, it works in audio and video, but we only pay out for video. And I was like, well, so I got to go back and listen to that again. But it was I just thought it was funny that it seemed like there were many questions when he would ask a very specific, and she'd be like, well, let's look at the big picture. And the other thing I would say with Spotify is go and look at their criteria for what it takes to be paid for video. And the other one that, which I guess you got to cover your butt. Here was another, like, I pick up on this stuff.
And then, as I said before, what actually happens in total is that for almost every show, premium video revenue matches or exceeds the payouts from the dynamic ads that you were running previously in Spotify Premium. So
almost every show, right? There's a little thing in there, because if it was like a guaranteed thing where you're going to make as much money as you did previously or more, that would be the answer. But she has almost every show. And I was like, okay, I'm listening with a skeptical, I hate Spotify ear, but I just thought it was, yeah. And Dan says, I think she's talking about Spotify premium subscribers. Yeah. Like YouTube premium. Yeah. No ads. That was the thing. You don't get ads when you're on Spotify premium. And so, yeah, it was, yeah. I thought it was interesting that there were multiple times when she's like, hey, let's step back and talk about the big picture. And I'm like, no, he's asking you.
Yeah. Well, but let me reframe that. It's easy to, we'll take both sides here for a second. I'll be the other side. Point and counterpoint.
Point. That's right. Jane, you ignorant slut. Yes.
I do feel that's a callback.
That's very
Nicely
old.
done.
Speaking of things that people under 30 don't get. Yes.
Yeah, I do feel like there are times that maybe the questions are so pointed and they're definitely looking for, I don't want to say the gotcha in that because they're not that way, but maybe they're pretty close. And as a representative for the company, she wants to say, hey, wait a minute. To talk about that, I want to make sure I'm not talking about that out of context. Our terms and services say this. That's really what she's doing, is pulling back and saying, before we get into that, let's make sure we all understand everything. Because if I answer it just straight up, it's going to sound out of context. And so I don't,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I said this last week. I mean, they're a for-profit organization, right? They got to, and they spend tons of money doing what they do, right? So yeah, I just to soften that a smidge, or at least maybe offer the other side of it. There is some resetting going on there to make sure, because someone from her organization is going to listen to that and say, hey, did you give the right corporate answer? From that perspective. So we all land somewhere on the spectrum with it, but I'll represent that from her side of things to say she's just trying to reset to make sure, hey, in the terms of the context of what we're talking about, let's make sure we understand everything, because it's complicated. Like anytime you're doing these kinds of things, like the legal mumbo jumbo that they put on the website is written intentionally to be vague so that there's leeway in this thing, right? So it's tough anytime we're doing something like that, it's tough.
Yeah. Because I just saw her come into the chat room. We want to give a quick shout out to Jody Krangle. She does, her website is Voices. I know it's with an S. Hold on. Let me scroll down. Voices and voice. Hold on. I've totally butchered it. I want to get this over. It's voiceovers. That's where the S is. Voiceovers and vocals.com. And she won a Sovas award. How cool is that? So we know she's awesome, but it's nice to see other people get that. So there you go. Jody Krangle, voice actor. Very cool. And she won for, I think it was like best host. Let me get this straight here. Best producer / host of a business and career podcast. So congrats to Jody on that. And again, if you want her to do some voiceover for you, she's at voiceoversandvocals.com. And is she good? Well, she worked for Coke. Enough said. If she's good enough for Coke, that sounds weird, because you know what I mean? It's like, because there's Coke, the drug. But,
well, technically, it's Coca-Cola. I think
Coca-Cola. Thank you. That's what I need to say.
That's the brand, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that is the brand. So that's awesome. I saw that and was like, yay! I like it when the good guys win.
Yeah, good job, Jody.
Yeah. Here's a classic one we haven't talked about in a while, and that is, what is the best way to share links? Just wanted to survey people on if they do any personal advertising for their shows, how they share links to it. I've done some sharing through Discord and usually share a Spotify link because that's what I listen to most podcasts on. And my podcast is available almost everywhere. So first of all, why is it not available everywhere? That would be the first thing I would fix. So I'm curious about if there's a preferred way on the receiving end, if someone shared a link to a podcast with you. Bonus question is where people share links and do personal advertising besides shout out into the voids of social media. Well, the first one is, where do I share it? And this is where I always have, I just proved Spotify has a horrible search. So what do? If I don't want to say, find me wherever you find podcasts, you say, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/follow. And there are all the links that I've given you, and you can have at least bare minimum have Spotify and Apple. That'll get you about 80%. From there, I'd want to add Pocket Cast. Why? Because that's how I listen to podcasts. You could do Cast. Starts with Cast, has the word pod in it. I forget, but Castavox, Cast of something. Well, there's Cast-O-Matic. There's a ton. But I know there's one that shows how many subscribers you have that's usually in the top 10. There's a ton. But that would be the one I would do. And then make sure on every episode there are links to those as well. And sometimes I get a little crazy and it'll be in the sidebar and in the episode and on the page. And then you're like, okay, enough with the Apple and Spotify buttons. But that's the goal in many cases, is we want people to follow, because it's the next level. It's the friendship ring. It's the whatever you want to call it, right? It's where you're like going, okay, I like you enough that I'm going to click that button and follow your show. And so keep that in mind. That's for me. And then that leads to them listening to more, which leads to maybe getting them on your newsletter. And then you're going to send them things to buy and whatever it's going to be. But that's what I would do. What a lot of people don't realize, especially in the US, because we all talk about Apple. And then when we're done talking about Apple, we talk about Apple. And then maybe later we'll talk about Apple. When you get outside of the US, 70% of people are on an Android phone. And in the past, before Apple had kind of the web-based version, if you sent somebody an Apple link, they were just like, hey, thanks for nothing. That doesn't help at all. So you gotta keep that in mind.
Dave, with the Ask the Podcast Coach brand, right?
Mhm.
That's a lot to type out. It's just a long askthepodcastcoach.com, right? Now it's sticky. I mean, and those aren't hard words to spell.
Right.
It's not like entrepreneur, right?
Oh, man. Yeah.
How do you spell entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
The best thing, that could probably ever happen to John Lee Dumas was that they took that away from him, because it's a terrible word to spell.
Yeah.
EOF was a ton better, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought, now ATPC, right, would be the shortened version of it. .com, you're never going to get, right? It's four letters. The 3 and 4 letter domains are gone. They are all bought. You're
Right.
going to have to bid somebody to get that. You may not buy atpc.com. But would you ever consider doing like atpc.me, which is really, really short, or atpc.fun, atpc.tech, and then using the slash that way, just to make it easier on people to say, yeah, just go to atpc.me, although that's ATPC, may be harder to remember than typing out the whole thing. I don't know. Just your thoughts on shortening that up or buying a different domain to not instead of your full site, but in addition to your full site.
Yeah, what you could do, because most of the time where that comes into play is because you're telling somebody a link. And so this is where we were just talking about this. Mark Lawley does practicalprepping.info, right? Now we know how to spell practical. Prepping, is it 1 or 2 P's? Maybe, but .info, and he could have something like prep link or prep, maybe if he could get a 4-character domain, but it might be prepping.links or whatever, and then tie that to, I am a big, huge fan of Switchy. It's been a few episodes since I've said the word Switchy. Switchy is a tool on, that thing, AppSumo. And this is what it looks like for those of you that are listening. It's basically showing a dashboard where a bunch of links, and I can see here, if I click on clicks, the most thing I've got most clicks on is I have a link to a podcast editor that I used a bit, and I'm like, all right, these guys don't suck. And so they have an affiliate program. So if somebody wants editing, I will send them that way. But I can go in, and it's super simple. You just say, hey, I want to go to this link. So maybe it's, Sweetwater. So I could go, it's probably sweetwater.com/?= try and spell this / whatever. So what is my link here? If I type in Sweetwater, I can see that I have a lot of links in here to Sweetwater. One is actually to Sweetwater, which has been clicked on 689 times. And their link is imp.com/. support.i114863.net/seed/2. Yeah, you get the idea. Where I tied the domain support this show to Switchy. So anytime you hear me say, oh, just go to supportthisShow.com/Sweetwater, then, it's, we're good. And that redirects to, if I edit this here, you can see where I'm saying, hey, go to this link when I send to supportthisShow.com/Sweetwater. So it's a way to do that. So I might say, go to prep.link/generator to get the generator that Mark likes over at practicalprepping.info. So that would be something. Yeah, have I ever thought about it? Yeah, because that is a mouthful. And I've seen domains working at Podpage that are like really long, like holy that's where you don't need and so you can, so that would be something. And Switchy is $40 for life, which is kind of weird because you're putting a lot of, you have all these links in a company that has a lifetime deal, and lifetime deals, while better than free programs, because free is a horrible business model, I think Switchy actually has, like if you go to their actual website, they have a like if you don't know about AppSumo, like you can pay them monthly. So they have a thing, kind of like Red Circle. Red Circle is a free media host, but they also have a paid version. So I'm not a big fan of free media hosts, but the fact that they do charge some people for stuff kind of makes me feel a little more, confident using them if I had to pick a free media host, which I wouldn't. Yeah. And then Ray says, yeah, I need to buy more domains. I'm working on an episode about running your podcast as a business. And since just announcing that was coming, at least $100, if not 200. I just let davesfreeclasses.com go, because it dawned on me, like if I had free classes, I could just go to schoolofpodcasting.com/free classes and not have to pay, whatever, $13 a year for that. And that's the thing. You go $13 a year is, it's $13 a year. It's, a little over $1 a month until you have 200 domains. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, holy cow. But yeah, I have way too many domains. And I've been letting
at least they don't renew all at once, right? I mean, that's
no, but there are months where you'll have like 6 or 7, renew, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what's there? That's $89 or something like that. I did sell one. I went with GoDaddy's reseller thing and sold one for, I ended up making $500. So that was cool. I was like, all right, that pays for a lot of domains that I probably still should let go. But I forget what it was, but it was a pretty good one.
Domains are interesting. My tech show, Home Gadget Geeks, used to be called Home Tech. And then a buddy of mine, Dave McCabe, started the Geeks Network, and he was like, hey, let's do some shows where they're all named Geeks. They got the word Geeks in them, and we'll start the Geeks Network and do this thing. So I changed from Home Tech to Home Gadget Geeks, and that it's funny how I like it because I named it, but I like Home Gadget Geeks better than I like Home Tech. Gavin Campbell, who's been a guest on my show a lot, he and TJ have picked up and changed. They now have hometech.fm. But I looked up the difference between the Geeks Network and geeksnetwork.com for both of them. So the Geeks Network is $20. Geeks Network by itself, $7,000.
Wow.
Like that's for the difference between the and not the. Now I'd say the Geeks Network all the time.
Right.
Dave let that go, and I just bought it.
Nice.
As we were talking, I'm like, yeah, I wanted that domain from a long time ago, and I may do something with that in the future, here in the next 10 years or so, something like good. It's $20, so it's good, always good to have a .com. But I only have 3. I only have 3 domains, right? The average guy.tv,
wow,
homegadgetgeeks.com, and now the geeksnetwork.com. I used to have like jimcollison.me, and I had a few others. I haven't had the domain problem that a lot of podcasters have had. I have not had very many in my I've had more. I think 6 was the most I had at any given time, and you kind of pare them back.
I think it's
Yep.
it might be an ADHD thing and a creativity thing and not thinking it through thing because you're like, oh, that would be cool. And then you're like, yeah. And then you get all these creative juices and you start thinking about it. This could really work if I did this, and if I did this. You're like, oh, you know what? Just in case, I'm going to buy the domain. And then you buy the domain. And then 7 years later, you're like, you know what? I only, yeah. So we're all chiming in. Daniel has 122. Rich says, you only have 3?
Yep,
that's
that's
weak,
it.
man.
Those
Yeah,
are the 3.
I have easily somewhere between 100 and 200. It's a lot. And a lot of them are, podcastingin6weeks.com, which I still might bring back. There's a bunch of those like, but there were a bunch that were just like, and then for a while I would hear somebody say the name of the show. Like I'd discover them someplace else and then I would go to their website.com. So if it was, Jim Collison Power Hour, I would go to, powerhour.com or jimcollison.com. And I would see that they did not have their own domain. And I'm like, and if it was a competitor, I did this to Daniel as a joke. Because he used to say, I forget what it was. It was like myfavoritepodcast.com or something like that, or whatever it was. And I bought it and put it at the School of Podcasting. And Daniel was like, all right, funny guy. Like, so I sold it to him. But I have bought other people when I'm like, wait, why don't you have your own domain? And wait a minute, you know what it's time for?
And now it's time for a power rant.
I'm not getting any contact from my website. I'm not getting, I just can't get any engagement. I don't know what's wrong. Is there something wrong with my content? Here's a novel idea. Maybe make it easy to contact you. I spent the whole week going to people's websites trying to contact them. And guess what? I don't want to contact you on Instagram. I don't want to schedule a meeting with you. I just want to send you a message that says, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Should we maybe meet? No. And I've had things where I could not contact people from their website. And yet what I hear the most is, I'm not getting any interaction with my show. Yeah, maybe because you made it absolutely impossible to do. Oh, it drove me nuts. There's one person that I just put in my notes, website is a mess. I was just like, a lot of people want the discovery call. Like, click here to discovery call. I'm like, I don't need a discovery call. I want to throw you an idea and see if we need to get on a call. But I was like, the one guy, I think I was very close to scheduling a call. And I was like, you know what? No. And then a lot of people click here to DM me on Instagram. And I'm like, no, like maybe again, because I have gray hair that maybe I just want to slide into your DMs, but I just like, we just did episodes, how newsletters and email are still used a lot. And I just could not believe how many people I just could not, So, is it just me being old, Jim?
No, you got to make it easy. You got to make it easy to contact you in some ways. I think I set up Jim at theaverageguy.tv just a long time ago, and that just folks know how to contact me there. If that's what we say it on the show all the time. If you want to contact me, send me an email, Jim at theaverageguy.tv. Super easy way to get a hold of me. I think the thing you got to do, though, it's not about just having a simple way to do it. Make sure the simple way is actually working. If you're going to use an email address, you got to make sure that you don't have your listeners going to spam, right?
Yeah.
So you never see them. That would be tragic. You need to make sure you're checking that email. Dave, I can't tell you how many podcasters I know who go through all this. They get their podcast launched, they're all excited about it, they're setting stuff up, and they set up one of those easy, like info@mypodcast.com. By the way, I wonder if mypodcast.com is available. So now you got me thinking about domains. By the end of the day, I'm going to have 100 domains.
Yeah.
I mean, but, they set up that info or that contact or that whatever that email address that they set up to get people to respond to them. And then they get busy doing their podcast and they never go back because it's not a regular routine for them to check that email address, or for a while they get nothing. And so they kind of forget. And then, 6 months later, you're like, oh, I haven't checked that inbox in 3 months. right? So you have to set up some habits, some reminders to on a day. I say daily. That would be you can't let somebody wait a week for an email. That's just you can't. It's not
Yeah.
acceptable as a podcaster. It needs to be within 24 hours. That's the one of the I'm a stickler on that one. Like you've got to be, if you're asking people to contact you about things and then you
Yeah.
take a week or 2 or a month to get back to them, well, that's a missed opportunity. I mean, you can. It's your podcast. You can do anything. I just think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I felt bad. Ray from aroundthelayout.com was in Cleveland. So I'm like, dude, we're having dinner. So I drove up and had dinner with Ray, and he was telling me about this other guy named Dave who had given me because of my podcast story, and somehow had reached out to me via email, and it just got lost somewhere. And he was kind of like bummed that it was like, that's not very Dave to like email him and not get an email back. So I've since like emailed him like, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to like just blow you off. I don't know where it went, but we've reconnected. But yeah. Ralph says, so Dave, do you think that buying a competitor's unrenewed domain dirty pool or good strategy? Well, here's the thing. I think I have one left that it's somebody else's domain that they didn't buy. So there's a part of me that goes, well, you're an idiot. You didn't buy your domain. But in the case of Daniel and anybody else that would say, hey, you have my domain, I consider I did you a favor because I will sell you your domain. Like, not for like, I'm not going to gouge you. I'm just going to go, hey, give me $20. Here's your domain. Or if I've had it for 3 years, because, you're an idiot, I want my $60 because if I hadn't bought this, somebody else who wouldn't sell it to you would do that. So I kind of feel like I'm doing you a favor. And until you are smart enough to figure out you need a domain, then I'll be happy to take your traffic because you're an idiot. Now, should I just reach out to the person and go, hey, I've got your domain if you want it? I probably should in reality, but to me, that's like, come on, kids. Like, you don't have a domain for your show. That's another one. There are people that I would say, hey, I have this project. I want to work with you. And you have this great service, or so you said. So if Jim says, hey, I make great candy and everybody that eats my candy loves my candy. And I'm like, great. I know people that want candy. Where can I send them to? And Jim goes, yeah, I don't have a website. What year is it? You don't have a website. Come on. You're kidding me. Oh no, I just work on referrals. I've been doing so good that just by word of mouth, I've been doing great. Great. How much more would you do if you actually had a website? Come on, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I just don't understand it. Like, I don't know. I don't want anybody else to find me. I'm a little hidden gem that I want you to work for. I don't it's, and media hosting is $20 a month. And I'm like, and they go, yeah, it's $20 a month. Well, then apparently you're not selling as much candy as you think you are then. If you can't afford a $20 a month host, just drives me crazy. Anyway, Jeff says, don't say I have a free trial for your software as a service product if I have to have a 45-minute call to teach me how to use your software. It should be easy enough that I don't need training. Yes. What's the new high level? There's some new thing, some CRM. It slices, it dices, it even juliennes. And I think it's high level, new high something. And everybody I know says it's the new Confusionsoft. Like, it does everything. It really does everything. And everybody I know that has bought it is like, yeah, I'll have to ask the guy. I hired somebody else to do my stuff because I bought this thing that was going to save me time and money. And I'm like, wait, if you have to hire somebody to do it because you can't figure out how to do it, go high level. Yeah, I've not heard everybody I know that uses that, unless you're taking the time to learn it, which of course makes sense, but it's not, at least I'm going to say I know 5 people that use that. And from my impression of their impression, it's not user friendly because it does everything. And so keep that in mind. It's hard to do that. When you have with Podpage, what we do is not all of our features are turned on. Like, not everybody needs a blog. So consequently, rather than having it clutter up your interface, you go in and say, I want to add a feature blog. And that way If you want it, it's there. If you don't want it, it's not on your thing. And it's the fun part then is educating people that like, hey, this does more than that. So, Ralph says, can I just host my podcast on YouTube? You can. It's just called a YouTube video podcast. So keep that in mind.
Oh, you can't use the word in the definition. It's not a podcast.
So keep that in mind. You know who doesn't make me lose my mind and drive me crazy? Our awesome supporters. That's right. Because you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and you can be an awesome supporter. And that doesn't always have to be a monthly subscription if that's not your jam. There are options over there for other ways to support the show. But this show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting. And if you're looking for unlimited coaching, yes, in fact, I was coaching this morning via an app that somebody that is not in my time zone, as well as Ray. Ray sent me a message to say he switched to Sweetwater, and he's going to get some. In fact, I think he said he already got his package today. But there's also an awesome community, so you can come hang out with Ray and Ralph and Mark and Chris. Half my students are here, as well as awesome courses, and it's all there. Use the coupon code COACH when you sign up at the School of Podcasting. And if we mentioned cool things to do like short links, well, those are built into Podpage. You can check that out by going to trypodpage.com, and that is my affiliate link. And this morning we're using Ecamm, and this is where I think we need a shorter URL, because now when I say things like askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm, and then I have to say, it's got 2 M's, I should just make 2. One that says Ecamm and one that says Ecamm with 2 M's, because I always have to say it as 2 M's because it's good. And if you need more Jim Cullison, and who doesn't want more Jim Cullison, well, then just go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And it's time for the Wheel o' Names. So I now have to get me out of my own way. And who will it be? Will it be Jody Krangle? Hey, she's already won an award. Maybe she'll be the featured supporter of the week. Will it be Max over at Aviation News Talk? Will it be Greg over at Indie Drop In, or Craig at AI Goes to College, or Ralph, or Chris, or John Muntz, or will it be the dreaded Glenn the Geek? Well, we'll find out when I click spin, and round it goes. And survey says it's gonna be Ross Brand. Oh, it's gonna be close. It's Ross Brand. It was almost Greg. If you want to learn about live streaming, that's the guy right there, Ross Brand on broadcasting. He knows everything. And I need to ask, I need to connect with him, because I know he was playing with Substack. Now has, I think, live streaming. They keep adding more and more features over there. So Ross, thank you so much for being an awesome supporter. And if you would like, again, to be an awesome supporter, it's super simple. Just go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and say, hey, you guys saved me time, you saved me money, you saved me some headaches, and you got me educated. And I'm now really hungry for some Pop-Tarts. Thanks, Dave and Jim. I got to go get some brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts.
I want one right now. I want it right now.
I'm jonesing for a Pop. You want the things that you can't have, and right now Pop-Tarts are not a good
I wonder if we have any in the house.
Well, the good thing is, to use the Jerry Seinfeld joke, they never go stale because they were never fresh.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. Dan says, I wonder how much of the website discussion is generation based, because I'm old. Younger folks are used to their home on the web being a social media, which is other people's websites. Yeah, they're all about link and bio. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I have one of those, powerofpodcasting.com. And the only time I ever use that is when somebody asks me, where can I find all your stuff? And on occasion, I'm trying to hint on the School of Podcasting that Dave does other things. And so occasionally I'll throw in, this podcast is part of the Power of Podcasting Network. Find it at powerofpodcasting.com. And that only works if you do it in a pukey, deep voice man thing. Nobody will go over there unless that. So Dave says, hey, anybody know of a resource for setting up a video stream or a delay for a small 100+ conference? Well, there's Zoom. Zoom does webinars. It's not cheap. I think they all do, like Restream. It's just when you go up to like lots of people, it gets expensive quick.
StreamYard's doing conference stuff now.
Yeah.
They might be worth a look.
Yeah. So that's I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. But yeah, if you go to any of the normal
Zoom will do it for you.
Yeah, like I say, I know Zoom. I know the one you just mentioned that's already flown out of my head, StreamYard. You know, so Restream. You know, I don't know that I would use like a I was trying to think. It's not Gumroad. They sell digital stuff, but there's a couple pod related ones that are made more for just live streaming to podcast audiences, which are not typically thousands of people. So that would be something to think about. But the fun part of that is, that's not something you can test. If you pay money and you're like, well, yeah, we're looking to have 1,500 people online, you can test. Obviously, you want to test it so you know the interface. But I don't know that I've ever been on I think Gary V was on StreamYard in the very early days, if I remember right. And it kind of shook StreamYard a little bit, where we're all kind of like, people are dropping off, or it was locking up or something like that. But that's the fun part.
I wouldn't think that would be the case anymore. I mean, they've been around a while. Yeah,
that was many, many, many moons ago.
Yeah. We use it at work. We've been using Zuddl, Zuddl, and they're a StreamYard-like company that came at this from the conference side first, and then has been thinking a little bit about streaming. But they do a lot of. We just use them. We had 6,000 people register for this conference a couple weeks ago. We had 1,500 or 1,800 live, I think, at any given point, and there were no issues there. They have a very StreamYard-like interface. In fact, I think one of them ripped off the other one in the when I got in there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot like StreamYard. So that's another one. That's an event platform we've been using. They seem they're kind of young and scrappy. It seems like that may be worth. I haven't looked at their pricing because I don't pay for it. I mean, we do, but I don't get the bill. So that might be Zuddl, Zuddl. That kind of, as I'm looking at their pricing, they're kind of more enterprise.
Yeah.
They're kind of more enterprise driven. Here, I'll throw the link to them in the chat. They're kind of expensive but it's enterprise. We use them for a lot of different things. In fact, we use On20. Well, I probably shouldn't say this. I'll stop right there. I'm not. They made information that should be getting out in public at the moment.
Yeah, so, Zuddl, maybe, which means to me they've been around about 10 years. You know what I mean? It's like that's when people stop buying the E.
Right.
Chris from castahead.net. We just did StreamYard on air last week, and it was great. So Zuddl, not exactly inexpensive.
No, I think it's enterprise pricing. Just to be clear on that. So I'll pull that one back. But if you're going to do a lot of this stuff, might be worth a look. Yeah.
Without beating this dog too much, just a quick answer here, because I see this a lot. I have an old podcast I'm reviving with a new series. There's a component that's heavy on audio and a common sense that is best to be viewed as video. So this is complicated with YouTube and their new way of handling podcasts. Okay, I don't want to be penalized on YouTube for having two versions of the same episode, one with video and one without, but I also don't want to create a bunch of work for myself having two podcast feeds. How should I get this set up so that my audio feed goes everywhere, that doesn't accept video podcasts, but my video feed goes to YouTube and still categorized as a podcast as well as Spotify? And this is just one of those things that it seems like everybody's kind of confused on. How do I get my video into YouTube? And we're overthinking it really a lot. And that is, you take your video, you log into YouTube, and you upload it. That's it. And you give it a name and a description and that whole 9 yards, and that's it. And then don't put your audio on YouTube. I'm almost like, I am 99.9 in camp. don't even bother. Like if it's, but I realize it's the second largest search engine and blah, blah, blah. But there's just a part of me that's like, okay, yeah, it's better than a poke in the eye. Most things are. But if you already have the video version, a full video version of that, I would not put an audio version. Just don't. And then just upload the video. Same thing for Spotify. How do I upload my Ask the Podcast Coach? Now, I haven't put a new episode up in probably 9 months, but there is a video version of Ask the Podcast Coach on Spotify. But after uploading it for about a year and getting maybe 8 views, of which 7 were me, I was like, this is not worth my time. And so I quit doing it. I might do it now because just to go back and play with Spotify. So, yeah. So just don't overthink it. How do I get my video on YouTube? You upload it to YouTube. Now, how do you make it a quote? And I got to put up my quotation marks, a YouTube podcast. You make a playlist and then say this playlist is a podcast. And that will send it all the way over to YouTube Music. Jim, do you use YouTube Music?
No.
Yeah.
I don't really listen. I don't really listen to music.
Oh, come on. Really?
Well, okay, hold on. Yeah, every once in a while. We'll listen to music on the A-Lady device.
Yeah.
You know, we have and Sarah, the wife, she and Sammy both use the Amazon Music subscription part. Every once in a while I try to use it and it says, your subscription is being used on another device. Do you want to stop using it there? Which means, you know, somebody else on the account is listening to it.
Yeah.
So I've got I'm like, nah, I don't care about music that much. Mostly listening to podcasts. So that's the part that matters the most to me anyways.
Yeah. Do you listen to radio? What do you listen to in the car, Jim Cullison?
Yeah, sometimes mostly podcasts, but sometimes radio. Yeah, sometimes radio. We got 3 or 4 radio stations that I like here in the Omaha area.
Jacobs Media just launched their tech report again. They do this, and the number one reason why radio is still the king in the car is it's easy.
Oh,
and even me, I just got a new phone. I'm on AT&T, and they let me upgrade whenever I want for really no money. And Daniel says every minute of music I listen to is about 2.75 minutes of podcast I could be listening to. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
But it's driving me crazy because my new phone, I go into Bluetooth and I have a little Bluetooth thingy that's tied into my, stereo in my car. And with my old phone, it would find it and automatically connect it. And now when I go in and I hold the button on the Bluetooth and it goes beep, beep, meaning, hey, it's connected. It doesn't, like my phone will not there used to be automatically connect to this device. And now when I go into it, it's like, do you want to forget this device and that's it. And I'm like, so it drives me nuts now that every time I go in the car, I have to go to Bluetooth, connect to the thingamabob. And I'm like, there's got to be a setting somewhere that lets me do that, but it's driving me nuts. Mark says I put on the real oldies on TV for background in the office.
Yeah.
But 90% of the time it's a podcast. Yeah. Rich says, I love Sirius XM. I've been listening to Howard Stern. It's weird. I got a thing because of my movie pass. I got like a 6-month pass to Sirius. And so occasionally I will go over and listen to Howard, depending on who he's interviewing. Dan says, there you go. Dan is the one guy I know. I use now actually 2. James Cridlin uses YouTube Music because they had a family plan before Spotify did. I love Spotify. I just, last night it dawned on me, if you didn't know this, you can make a playlist and then
what did you just say?
I know.
You said I love Spotify?
I love Spotify for music.
Did you? Okay, all right.
Yeah. Wait, what? Yeah.
What? What?
Yeah. Which is kind of weird because I wish they would stay in their lane. But you can make a playlist. So I have a playlist like my favorite Black Crowes songs, and my favorite Ted Nugent, my favorite whatever. And then I have a master list called My Favorite Tunes. And you can take my favorite Black Crowes and add it to the My Favorite Tunes playlist. And I just now, like last night, I realized I did not have a My Favorite Dio's playlist. So I went through because I want to hear him sing about the night and the schwalk and the dark and all the other dragons and stuff. And then I said, okay, now add that to my favorite stuff. And it's, so I love them as a music service. I just hate them as a podcast service because, well, that whole, pull that.
Yeah, no, we get it. Let's not go there. Let's not. This is going to sound crazy, but I've been using Pandora
Oh, love
like
Pandora.
workout. Yeah, and you can actually kind of tune it, so like I have a Kenny Loggins channel.
Oh,
So you start with Kenny Loggins, that's you get the 80s.
right.
And then as it's playing the first time or whatever, you go through and like some of the stuff, and we'll often do it on the deck with the kids. I put it on the TV, and then
Yeah.
we like this song, so we like it. So my Kenny Loggins playlist on Pandora is awesome. I mean, if you like an 80s mix, it's awesome, right?
Have you gone
But
into the discovery mode? Because there's the discovery mode, which is like, hey, if you like Kenny Loggins, you might like this guy. And then there's a just play the hits, just play Kenny. And then there's something like new artists in this genre, which I think is also discovery. And Pandora is the thing. I use the A lady in the kitchen, and I'll be like, hey, Amazon woman in the tube, play Pandora. And I have a King's X station that plays King's X, but they also play a whole bunch, because I've given it the old thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Pandora's they call it the lean back experience. Yes.
Are you paying for it?
I'm paying for it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We take the ads, and I don't pay for it at all. Still on the free account.
Yeah.
And actually, ads are not bad. Just to be honest, I mean, I'm not a big ad fan. I do everything I can to block them, but I shouldn't say that as a podcaster, but I do.
Right.
And Pandora actually does a really nice job of not being intrusive. We have a channel. It's called Spanish Guitar, and we listen to it when we're on the deck and we're enjoying cocktails and maybe a cigar or two.
Yeah.
We play Spanish guitar, and we've tuned it up a little bit, so it's just the way we like it. But the ads come in Spanish, which is hilarious, right? Because somehow they've equated, because it's Spanish guitar,
right?
I must speak Spanish, so I get ads for Home Depot in Spanish and some of those kinds of things, which is just hilarious. And you're like, guys, know your audience a little bit, but okay. It is a good for free. I think it's one of the best free music services that are not ad intrusive. Yes, I get ads, but they're not terrible, and they're not too many. So that's kind of, I guess, when I do listen to music and I'm doing it that way, that's where we go.
What are your thoughts on when a podcast starts with ads? Because somebody recommended a marketing show, and they started off and they're like, on today's show, topic A and B, and later we'll talk about C and D. And then they played 3 ads. And every time one was over, I'm like, okay, well, they're going to do an ad. And then the second one came on. I was like, okay, I guess I got to sit through another one. And when they started the third one, I was like, are we ever going to get to the show, kids? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough when you lead with ads. I think you can get away with a 30-second ad up front before you even say anything. Click play. There's an ad. I think some people are forgiving of that. Wall Street Journal podcast does that. And I immediately just hit the 30-second button on the car. Boom, to get rid of it. And they do one in the middle and then do one at the end. So I just 30 seconds through those. And they're all the same ads all the time. So it's not like I haven't heard them. You hear the first 5 seconds of the ad, you know what it's about, right?
Right.
But yeah, I don't think right off the bat, 30 seconds, if that's what you were going to do, I don't think you can get away with a minute. I don't think you can get it away with 2.
No. Well,
much less 3. Like that second ad, people are like, and then the third one is played, they're gone. They're like, okay, I'm not doing this. Like, I am not. This is the way it's starting. So, did we play ads up front on this one?
On this one, like if you listen to this one this week, you'll hear today's featured supporter is Ross Brand from livestreamuniverse.com. You should be like,
that's a personalized ad, right?
Yeah,
those are people know that. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You can put a lot of information in 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. You could just say, this week's episode is brought to you by Sweetwater. For more information, go to supportthisShow.com/Sweetwater. And that's like 8 seconds. Because I used to hear that from Mark Maron. Hey, people, today's show is brought to you by Squarespace, where you can make a great-looking ad and blah, blah, blah. And it's not as good as Podpage, whatever. And that'd be it. But it was just a mention, and then later in the show, he'd go into, how it was great and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that one I don't mind. And they did a study where it was like if you had a single 1-minute ad, it's better than having 4 15-second ads, because after the second one, they're like, okay, are they coming back? And then they don't. If you ever watch Friends on Nickelodeon at night, it is insane the amount, and it's not how long the ad break is. I know it's at least 2 minutes because that's normal. So it feels like it's 10 because it's just ad after ad after ad. And you're like, are we ever going to go back to Jennifer Aniston? Like, come on, what's, crazy.
Could there be more commercials?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what better way to get ads in a podcast than talk about ads in a podcast?
That's it.
You got 2 or 3 ads, like you mentioned 2 or 3 ads as we were talking about ads.
Yeah.
Doing this, we could have snuck those in.
That's
and
it.
Nobody would have known. Yeah.
Well, I had someone, because I'm set up on this show that if you match, I will actually put your ad in my show because it's 90 minutes. We got plenty of time to occasionally break for an ad. And I'm really picky. This one guy, it was about, I forget what it was, but it was a good match content-wise, but I went over and listened to his show. He didn't start talking for 45 seconds. It was just music. It was just like, you start the show or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's just, oh, that's not it. That's the buzzer. Yeah. So they're just like, you hit play and you're just like, is anybody ever going to talk? No. They're just, okay. And it just kept going. And I'm like, did the host forget? Is it a mute button? What's going on? It was literally like,
go over there and knock on the door.
It's like, that's it. We need to call the police and have them go in and check.
I think they passed out.
It just kept going. I was like, okay, are you ever going to come on? And I was like, well, I'm not sending my people over there. They're going to be like, what's wrong with this guy?
Sounds like the beginning of a Jim Rome show. That's what that one.
Yeah, that was it. It's
he
like,
would
hey,
have giant positives. That guy.
Oh yeah,
Jim Rome, giant. There was a thing going on for a while in radio. I don't know if they're doing this anymore. Like where they would artificially squish the audio from people's shows, right, in dynamically. So you might be recording something and they're taking the spaces out so they can dynamically jam more ads at the end of your show, kind of thing. And I think to get around that, Jim Rome just played music in the background so that he would take giant pauses.
Here's a question. So you used to listen to Jim Rome, apparently.
I did, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you listen anymore?
No, I can't find him anymore.
Exactly. That's the thing. Yeah. So here's how Jim Rome ruined his career. He used to be everywhere. This is when I was driving around fixing copiers and all. Like he was my guy in the Howard Stern in the morning, Jim Rome afternoons. And he was like, it didn't matter where I drove in Ohio or Pennsylvania, I could find Jim Rome. And if I was listening on AM and the station faded out, I'd just go seek and he'd be on there somewhere along with, ladies and gentlemen, what's that guy's name? Rush Limbaugh. Those are the only people on AM radio. And Jim got really popular. He was on ESPN, and then basically I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden he went from ESPN to Fox, and he went to somehow he messed it up to where he's not everywhere anymore. And I think it's on ESPN. I saw where his show was on, and I was like, oh, cool. And the problem is there are the clock, as they say in the industry, the clock, right, of when do we go to ads is different on TV than radio. And for whatever reason, they're not in sync. And if you watch his TV show, it's a hot mess because there are times when you are just watching him and it's just, here, look, let's look at the studio. Oh, let's look at his executive producer. And there's nothing. You're watching a guy look into a computer. That's it. And then Jim will be there and then it will come back. It's a mess to where, oh, wait, we've got to run ads for TV now. So the radio station goes to this, just music for that. Or, same thing on, forget what it was. It might've been ESPN. There was one where it's like, enjoy your moment of Zen because they didn't have an ad. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you could just run an ad for something on your station. But yeah, he kind of ruined his career because I used to listen to him and now I have to remember. And if I do, I go to his website and click listen live because I don't think he's in Cleveland, which is a major sports town. And so this is a case where you have to be careful. It's kind of like going exclusive on Spotify right? It just if you make it too hard to find you, people go, well, I'll just listen to whatever. So yeah, he kind of blew it, and I know
AM radio kind of became kind of just terrible, and then the FM sports channels have gotten weird, and so it's just like, all right, I'm go back to music. Just listen to the 80s. It's easier when I want to do that most of the time. Lately, I've been trying to get more news in, and so I've been listening to podcast news sources as opposed to trying to catch the news live, on the radio. So can kind of control my content a little bit more that way.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Zach says Dave needs it when he puts out his worst podcast advice of all time, April Fool's episode. Yeah, I could do that. I could do here's the worst. Well, it's my favorite is when somebody asked me, and I'm paraphrasing, but what's the genre I can talk about where I do the least amount of work and make the most amount of money? I'm like, that's the direct opposite of what it should be in terms of your attitude towards podcasting. It should be, okay, who's my audience that I'm willing to serve for free until I get enough of them to somehow monetize that? Yeah, Randy says traditional radio is dead. Not according to reports from the radio people, of course. But what's interesting on the Jacobs Media, they showed like 10 years ago, like radio and podcasting were like, radio was way up here. Podcasting was way, like whatever, 15% or something. And over the years, you're just watching radio come down and podcast. So in about another 5 years, podcasting is going to overtake radio. And if they ever switch things out in the car and make it easier, forget it. Put a fork in it. Yeah, AM radio is they're on the verge. AM radio is they keep hinting that they might do away with it so they can use those frequencies for other things. I don't know if it's Wi-Fi or what, but that's one of the reasons why I hear that on occasion where they're like, well, they would do this, but those frequencies are used by AM radio. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, as soon as whatever they want to do in those frequencies makes more money than radio, the men with suits and cigars, not that cigars are bad, but all bad guys in movies are,
Easy now. Listen, AM should just be shut down. I do not know why we need AM radio anymore. Out here, listen, I live out in the Midwest. You're in the central part of Ohio, so it's still pretty rural, and it kind of makes sense in the rural communities. But I don't know if AM that should probably go first, and those channels should be given back to the world.
Yeah,
that those frequencies should be given back.
Well, it sounds so bad unless we have a flamethrower 1100 that literally goes from Cleveland into Pennsylvania, and I think somebody said West Virginia. It's just this power. Now that, and the thing I love about it, that was the one where I would listen to the drive home guy, sports guy, and if you would download his podcast, it was, I want to say 35 minutes, and I'm like, where's the rest of the thing? And it dawned on me, oh, it's ads. The other 25 minutes are ads. And some of the ads, which drive me crazy, were you're listening to the Mike Trevisano show, and in the middle of the Mike Trevisano show, it's like, the music comes on. Hey, every Monday through Friday, it's the Mike Trevisano show from 5 to 7 on WTAM. And I'm like, I'm already here. Why are you telling me to listen to the Mike? It's like when I go to the movies. There are at least 3 commercials on how movies are better when you watch them in the theater. And I go, I know, I'm here. You don't have to remind me. So dumb. So crazy.
Is that guitar music YouTube safe?
It is. It should be.
Is it?
We'll find out. But yeah,
we will find out. So.
Yeah, we will. I was tempted to play some King's X just for fun, but I was like, yeah, let's see just how that would get us banned really quick.
Yeah, not banned, but you're going to get a strike. Maybe not even a strike. You're not going to be allowed to monetize the episode. You monetize these, right? Do you monetize these on YouTube?
I do. It's funny because, most of the traction from this video is happening right now where
for sure.
I don't know how many people we have in our chat room right now? Does it show? I see we have 5 likes.
35, 40, something out there. Something like
Yeah, I know I have a button here. If I do this, but I don't know where it puts it. It's supposed to show me how many people are watching right now. Oh, I can see it. It's just the problem is it it has a little picture of an eye. So like I could show this, but then on top of the eye, it has, I think it says 37 people in the chat room. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
but
something like
at any rate, we love the people in the chat room when they show up every Saturday for Ask the Podcast Coach. We are here every Saturday. Everybody enjoy, whether you celebrate 25 diehards, they say, thank you very much. Whether you celebrate Easter or not, spend some time with your family tomorrow just to say hello and make sure they're okay and make sure they're, and if you're not getting along with your family, take tomorrow to get along with your family because they're only around so long. So, Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Aaron Lawrence joins me, and we talk a little bit about e-bikes. We spent some time covering some topics that she has been reviewing at techgadgetscanada.com. So check it out. It's available right now, homegadgetgeeks.com.
Yeah, Ralph is saying it shows you on your Stream Deck. Mine has, I see it, but the problem is there's a little eyeball behind it. And so I have this eyeball in white and then white text on the white eyeball. So it just looks like
White.
some number.
Looks white.
Yeah. But on the School of Podcasting, I'm going to do my second presentation that I did at Podcast Movement Evolutions, which is basically look at what works. Here you go. If you don't want to listen to this week's show, look at the different stats that you have available, find out what is working, and then do more of that. There you go. Thank you. Good night. That's the 30-second version of that. But there are multiple streams of data, and then what can I get from each one? So that will be coming up on the School of Podcasting, which is great, which means I don't have any show prep. I just got to basically do my presentation and make it sound like I'm not looking at a bunch of slides. But that'll be fun. And we're here every Saturday, 10:30 to noon Eastern. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. If you have a question and you're not listening live, go to AskThePodcastCoach.com/voicemail, and we'll play it next week. See you, everybody. Take care.